a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a ride.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very. Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this episode, this is going to be part 2 of Dr. Ian Rubenstein and I's discussion. This one, though, goes a lot more into the medical field in general, just the practice of medicine, the ideologies of healing. We really go deep down some more of the logistical type of a conversation about the medical industry, germ theory versus terrain theory. We talk a lot about vaccinations. We talk a lot about just mental states of health and how that can affect you, placebo effect, but placebo effect on a large collective conscious, and how that's possibly engineered. I mean, we go down some really, really interesting rabbit holes on this one, guys. That's why I had Dr. Ian Rubenstein back on. He is a wonderful talk to. We go really, really deep on this discussion. So without any further ado, part 2 of Dr. Ian Rubenstein. All right, everybody, welcome to part 2 of Dr. Ian Rubenstein and I sitting down talking about the real stuff. Now, I had you back on because your last episode, which was the one before this, I'm going to release them back to back, was talking to us about your story and about everything that you've experienced, and you've set us up a wonderful foundation, and a foundation, that theme is something that I do want to talk about on this episode. So I had you back because I had way too many questions to cram into one episode. So I think that now that we've gotten that established, we can just jump right into it. So let's talk about the fantastic marrying between the science and the esoteric that you experience. You, like I said on the last episode, are walking between two worlds. So what is that like? You've got like your own little version of hemi-sync going on over here, where both sides of your brain are communicating and clicking on all cylinders. What is that like? Is there any kind of conflict in there with the ideologies, or have you found a way to balance and bridge the two?
Well, I have found a way to balance it now, but at first it was really difficult. And I remember I'd spent 9 years. First of all, I too have worshipped at the altar of science. You know, I grew up in the 60s, lived through the Apollo program. In this country, they call it the white heat of technology. You know, I'm into science. I was an early adopter of computers, but at the same time, I keep a broad mind. When this all kicked off, I had spent 9 years writing the software that was going to make me a fortune, but never did. Remember that one?
Yes.
My rostering, my scheduling system, which was bloody good for doctors, but never came to fruition. So, and it seemed to me that I'd looked up from my computer screen, because when you're programming, time just goes into overdrive, and the world had changed behind me. The world had gone bonkers. You know, the normal solid world had just gone absolutely batshit crazy. You know, I was hearing voices, coming across strange coincidences, getting readings in police stations from people I'd never met before, and finally ending up sitting in a psychic development circle thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? That was the age of 47. So yeah, it was like my entire solid world had just gone absolutely crazy. But it was allied to that was a sense of tremendous fun. Like, really, you know, life had suddenly become a lot more interesting. But whilst I'd always been, I used to read Fortean Times for many years, so I've always kept I've always been interested in this stuff. Actually, mainly UFOs, more than mediumship and stuff. I still am fascinated by UFOs, or UAPs, as we're meant to call it now. There's been some. Sorry.
Oh no. Yes, I know the UAP thing is hilarious. Because it's the same damn thing, right? It's just they changed the name of it. That's it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the ideas I've heard for that reason is because when FOIA came out and you could start requesting that specific keyword searches on government reviewed documents, UFO doesn't pop up if you search UFO, because they started calling them UAPs a long time ago to kind of thwart the efforts of people looking into it. But now that we know that, of course, it's all moot. So are you ever standing there in front of, your prescription pad, and you're in front of a patient, and they've, explained everything to you, your Western medicine training kicks in and says, all right, they need amoxicillin. And then a voice comes to you that says, no, all they need is like some dandelion tea. Do you ever kind of go with that odds?
No.
It's always a clear one diagnosis or the other.
Once and one only.
Okay.
Once only. And even that does. So you've got to understand that I've always been interested in counseling and the psychodynamic view of general practice. And I've always said that, medicine is not just about prescribing a penicillin or pills. I use acupuncture, I've used hypnosis. I've always had a broad view. I think there is a place for allopathic medicine, but that's just a place. And I've always said I think modern medicine worships at the altar of science, and actually the tail of science is wagging the dog of medicine. And we can talk about that later. I know you want to get into that. But one time only, and I've told this many times before, very quickly, a woman came into my room, sobbing her heart out. I'd known her for many years, but she'd never been depressed. And I actually wrote out a prescription for citalopram, which is an antidepressant, modern antidepressant. And as I printed it out, as I took it out from the printer, I felt a blow to the back of my head, and I heard a voice saying, ask her about her father. And with that, I saw the misty outline of a man over her shoulder. I could actually see it, like almost objectively, not just with my mind's eye. And I heard myself saying, Lucy, tell me about your dad. And she stopped crying. She said, he was killed 38 years ago by the IRA. Do you think that's why I'm depressed? And I said, well, did he look like? And described the man over her shoulder. She said, yes, how do you know? And I said, rather uncomfortably, Lucy, I could see him over your left shoulder. At which point she leapt at me, grabbed my arm and said, thank you, doctor, you don't know what this means. So the story is that when the Troubles kicked off in Northern Ireland, although she was Catholic and her father was Catholic, he didn't agree with what the IRA were doing. And she thinks that they killed him. And she was traveling from the UK to Southern Ireland at the time that he was killed. And so she never saw her father, but she'd always felt that her father was around her after he died. But when she said that to the rest of the family, her brothers and sisters said, you mustn't think like that. That's not in our religion. But I actually confirmed to her that her father was actually around her. She felt. Not only that, it was 2 days, coming up 2 days. Her father was killed on, I think it was December the 8th, and this was December the 6th. So it was 2 days coming up to the anniversary. And as every doctor will know, these anniversary effects, even though you're not aware of them, are very powerful. And she said, anyway, at the end of that, she told me the story, and she said, well, thank you, doctor. Now that I know why I'm depressed, I don't need your silly pills. She stopped crying, left my room, my jaw was on the floor, and I thought my career was over because, I've given a patient a message. However, and she then went out and told my receptionist, Carol, what had happened. And I thought, well, the word's going to spread. And I was really, really worried about it. 4 weeks later, she came back to see me, all smiles. I said, Lucy, what's wrong? She said, nothing. So I said, well, why are you here then? She said, I've come to tell you a story. So she sits down, smiling, and says, 2 weeks after I saw you, doctor, I was at my Irish social club, and there's this creepy guy there who's said to have the second sight. The second sight in Irish tradition is obviously psychic powers. And he said, he's a bit creepy. He kept on tugging at me, saying, Lucy, I've got a message for you. Come to this room, I'll give it to you. And she said, I'm not coming to any room with you. If you've got a message for me, you tell me right now in the hall. And he said, Lucy, do you know there's a fella over your left shoulder? I think he's your father. And she said, of course I do. My doctor told me that 2 weeks ago. And she said, you know what, doc, that sure took the wind out of his sails. And she came back specifically to tell me that. So that had been validated. Now, look, that's not a scientific validation by any means, but that story, I just thought, what was that about? Because remember, even now, I'm still very skeptical of what I'm doing. But as far as she was concerned, that was evidence that her father was around. She didn't need any antidepressants, so it saved the British National Health Service the cost of antidepressants. So it's very powerful. And that's when I realized that this is very useful for bereavement counseling. Not only that, she told the message to her sister. Sister lived in Spain at the time. And then her sister phoned her up and said, well, after you told me that message, I rolled over in bed and my deceased husband was next to me and he gave me a cuddle. And so when her sister was over from Ireland, She made an appointment to see me and introduced me to her sister. It affected the whole family. The whole family seemed to take comfort in this. Then they started having their own experiences. I mean, it was just weird. And sorry, so I mean, Lucy's still around. I still see her, and we have the most amazing relationship.
In my mind, though, this is way more effective than anything you could have dulled her experience down with or masked. I mean, because that's treating a symptom, right? And that's something that Western medicine, and I'm going to just refer to it as Western medicine from here on out. Basically, your basic schooling training, because we can all kind of go with that model. So what's interesting about this in my mind is the fact that you do have an additional ability to diagnose things or to recognize issues in people. So in the same way, you're still healing. You're still doing what your heart is set out to do, which is to be a healer. Shaman used to do this. You're basically just a shaman that's memorized a bunch of stuff that they told you to memorize. But
well, we can talk about I call it shame. You call it shaman. I call it shaman. But shamanism. What does a shaman do? He goes on a vision quest. Okay, he goes to the other world. And he comes back with a cure. So what does a primary care physician do in the UK? It's very important, right? The patient comes in and we think about what we're doing. Most of the time we treat them, or I consult Google or whatever. But often I will refer the patient or ask a question of a specialist in the big shiny building called a hospital. And they will give me the knowledge. So I'll go on a vision quest, seek the cure, and then come back. I mean, I think that these principles are very similar, that there's a sort of secular shamanism which goes on. So I think that doctors are involved in a ritual that's been going on for thousands of years. And I think it's just our Western slant on it. So I mean, I'm not saying they're the same. I'm saying the process is the same. And I think that doctors should be looking at that, because what's happening right now is we've become so taken by the science that everything's got to be a randomized controlled trial. And it's all got to be in charts and sort of numerical. And they miss this very important healing part, which is the ritualized aspects of medicine. So that's one thing I suppose I've always been aware, because when you do hypnosis and when you're a primary care physician, if you're interested in psychological things, you become aware of that. But I think that's quite important. So yeah, I mean, there's a chapter in my book called Suburban Shaman for that very reason.
So
and there's Sorry, go on.
Oh, just whenever we talk about rituals, and I agree with you that they're very similar actions, but the results of these actions are very, very different. This is, in my mind, the medical industry. And again, I look at this with a different set of eyes than you do. And this is another reason I want to have this discussion with you, and you're willing to have it, which is wonderful. That's a huge tick in my pro box. So whenever you talk about rituals, it is ritualistic, but perhaps it's been skewed to put out a ritual that's not as beneficial as the older ways, because simply there's a gain to be made in the eyes of the pharmaceutical industry or the mainstream, however you want to put it. The way that you have to practice now, what you get paid to do now.
Well, first, you're to some extent your preachers are converted. In the old days, doctors would see drug reps. You know, these are drug salesmen. They come and visit us, even though we're part of the NHS. I mean, it's still up to us what we prescribe. So before this was banned, because it's not allowed anymore, they would come for most of my working lifetime, most GPs, the end of the surgery, end of our clinic, they say, "Oh, do you want to see the drug rep from, I don't know, whoever it was?" And I would always refuse to see them, because I knew from my training in hypnosis that actually they were very, very effective at selling. Now, most doctors think, "Oh, well, you know, these drug reps not going to influence me." But you get some guy in a sharp suit showing you flip charts with graphs that look scientific and very graphics, you know, which in 15 years ago you didn't have the slick graphics we had now. You know, these are very slick graphics. I mean, it all looks very good, and it's very easy to influence someone. So I always refuse to do that. Now, no, I'm not anti-medicine. In fact, but I think that, I mean, look, you know, I mean, antibiotics, steroids, modern surgery, they're really, really useful, and they've saved lives. Never have people lived so long. I mean, you know, our life expan's going up. People aren't in fear of infections. I mean, a simple infection could kill you in the old days. And that's great, but there are downsides to it, and it's dumb. I mean, if the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, basically. And right now, I think that that medicine is worship at the altar, is worshipping at the altar of science. However, you can see a time when medicine that we practice becomes totally technical. I mean, it maybe will become so powerful that you can do all sorts of science fiction, Star Trek stuff that would be great. We might all live for 500 years, but even then, there are still lots of human suffering, lots of things that people will make them make people feel ill, that you'll still need someone human to talk about. And people, being incredibly complex, they will still present with physical illness that's actually down to their mental state, their social state, spiritual state, and these will be genuine physical complaints that will completely fox our science, or we'll be able to cure, but it will just be a sticking plaster over what the real problem is.
You're right, but you are a rare exception because you actually consider alternative methods. Now, I would say that you are part of a 0.1% of people that either can do this, but that actually recognize and will utilize and consider that whenever, assessing a patient's issues or diagnosis. So, and back to what you said about ancient times and infections killing people, I don't know how accurate that is. People haven't had their wisdom teeth yanked out of their head for thousands of years before Western medicine came in and started doing it. We didn't have our tonsils taken out for thousands of years. There's an argument to be made that everything that ails us here on Earth already exists on Earth, and it's free in nature, and you just need the knowledge and wisdom, which a ton of people have, to be able to cure anything. You hear stories constantly about the Western medicine, and again, we're just going to call it that, Western medicine snuffing out natural cures that would cure the entire planet, like cancer. It's all been cured, but they won't give you that information. And of course, this is where we get into the big bad they, because there is a motive. There's a modus operandi. The way that I picture the medical industry, have you ever seen the movie Apollo 13?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you remember whenever in that movie, there's an issue on the craft and they have to solve an O2 thing? They have to build.
Yeah, they have to get the square they got a square manifold inlet, and they have to get a round thing on it. They use duct tape or something, don't they? Yeah.
Yes, and so in the Situation Room, or how they solved this problem was they walked in with a box of items and they dumped it on the table and said, "This is what we have to work with. We need to solve this problem based on only this." Okay.
Yeah.
So my point is about the medical industry. Perhaps this is how they operate. Okay, you can solve this medical problem, but you have to do it with pills. You have to do it with something this pharmaceutical company came up with. You cannot use something that's not
what
there.
is a pharmaceutical company? That's what they do. They make drugs. So they're not going to find anything else.
So this about the medical industry is what I find fascinating. Again, because you are walking between worlds. You have a hand in the allopathy, but you also, of course, have your training. So what I mean by this is, what do you think, though, about a model to where instead of human beings like us and Americans, like you said, we take our health into our own hands a lot over here. We'll go straight to a specialist or we'll go straight to an acupuncturist. What if allopathy was the first line of defense for all of the medical field, and it was standard, and there was no influence by pharmaceutical companies to inject or to pill or to suppress the symptoms? Rather, you go through an allopathic part, and one would argue that if the understandings of the ancient teachings based on the ideology that everything you need is all around you and the earth has already provided every answer that you could look for, you just have to know how to look, then what if that was the first line of defense for folks? And then therefore you would probably screen out, I mean, we're throwing numbers around because we don't know what that would look like, but let's say a vast majority of things that can't be solved with surgery or pills or anything like that. Now, if that's necessary, it's available, but it's a last resort. Western medicine should be a last resort, right?
Yeah. So, but I mean, allopathic medicine is Western medicine. It's the opposite of homeopathic medicine. I quite no. When I was at medical school, they talked about the lay referral chain, and in the old days, they'd say that before a patient even got to see their doctor, they would have consulted their family, someone who knew a bit of the other, a wise older woman, and then they go and see the doctor. So that a lot of that happens, or used to happen. I'm not sure it happens so much now, because society's become a lot more. I mean, in my lifetime, it's become a lot more. You have to be credentialed. You have to go to the right person. There's so much information pushing you there. And there's a lot of pressure on doctors to put people on pills. Now, there is no doubt about that. There are some, in fact, there's a controversy going over, a little controversy on one of the medical forums. There's a there's a reasonably well-known cardiologist in this country who's saying that statins are not a good idea. And people are calling him a quack. But the guy's not a quack, he's a cardiologist. What he's saying is we need to address people's lifestyle and the rubbish they eat and stuff like this, which is absolutely true. And of course, when you go back to folk remedies, I mean, there's enormous amount of folk remedies that have probably got some basis in fact. And I mean, the classic one being digitalis, which is from the foxglove. Aspirin was from the willow bark. So, I mean, a lot of the medicines that we use, actually from the pharmaceutical companies, have been discovered in nature, and they just then pump them out as a pure form. So, and this is the thing, because a lot of the herbalists will say, well, that's the problem, they're pure. And I have a patient who's a herbalist, and she explains to me that herbalists, whereas a doctor will work with one particular pure drug, where they can see in a lab its effect, a herbalist says, no, you have a symphony of molecules.
And
nature provides so you're not working with one note, you're working with a whole orchestra.
Right.
Which is, I think, is quite an interesting concept. But I mean, I'm not trained as a herbalist, but I certainly give credence to these ideas. The problem you have is everything has to be, once you get into science, you have to prove it. And proving it means a randomized controlled trial. And then you've got to look at how your trials conducted and how it's made up and that's the devil's in the detail, Brandon. That's where and I could go on about that because if you look at the trials that are used for putting people on drugs, a lot of them, well, now they're saying they didn't include many women, so what it's male biased. Oh, we didn't think of that. And then how does that then, so if that was done in, say, a white middle class population, how does that then play into my very mixed, non-white, non-middle class population I look after? And the answer is we extrapolate, but it's hard to tell. So I don't know. This is where, when you really get into the science, get down into the weeds, you realize it's not so clear cut.
Well, but a lot of people say, in this, do you believe whenever somebody says the words settled science, do you think that that's inaccurate? Do you think that in that particular moment, on that particular subject, that we've learned everything there is to know about that?
Well, no, science doesn't know anything. Science just limits your uncertainty. So there's nothing settled about science. I mean, science never tells you what's true. It tells you it tells you that what isn't true, what it can fairly say isn't true. But it doesn't limit the choices. I mean, there'll be other things. So we know that. Go back to something simpler, relativity. We know that Newton was an approximation because then Einstein came along and said, well, the orbit of Mercury shows that there's something weird going on. Okay, and then quantum physics comes along and says, well, yeah, Einstein says time is all geometry, but we can't marry quantum physics with it. So there's something else going on. So we know it's incomplete. So all science tells you is so science just gives you a model that you work with that is predictive for the time being.
But it's
I mean, you're looking always to disprove it. It's a model, yeah. It's not reality. It's a map. It's not the territory.
But it's a map based on a certain set of standards. It's them pulling their map out of that box from Apollo 13. They only can work within this parameter. So you can solve a problem with
Given these things, this is what you can solve the problem with, yeah.
Right, but that's the thing. It's coercion at that point. Whenever you're given a choice between two things and not allowed to explore out of it, that's not choice. That's the illusion of free will or choice. That's called coercion. When you're given two sets of things, but there might be answers outside of it. The problem is those two things that you're offered, they make money on it both ways. There is a hand here that is very skewed and very motivated by only using the items in this box. One could extrapolate this out to the rocket community. There's been a lot of rumors for a long time that we've had free energy, that we've had the ability to travel the stars without rockets. Now, whenever you look at stuff like that, that is, again, another thing. It's like they're governed. They have training wheels on. You can only use what's in this box. And then a lot of people will say, well, look, we've got this technology over here. It's actually been proven. No. Don't look at any of that. Even though it's better and it works well and you don't need us anymore, we're not going to allow you access to that type of treatment or that type of idea. This is where I'm the most excited, but the most apprehensive about my excitement with the medical field is when you start marrying the homeopathic, like you said, and alternative methods.
No, homeopathy is something, you get your terms right.
No, I want
homeopathy is a particular system
about taking from the earth things that are already naturally here and incorporating them into the body.
Yeah.
That is what I meant. I meant to say homeopathic the whole time, and thank you for the clarification.
Right, yeah.
So marrying those ideas, now what you've done is you've taken all access to all information, not just the access to the information that they tell you have to pull from. They give you a textbook. Well, in that textbook, it doesn't tell you about the sound healing technologies that people have been working on to destroy tumors in the body without having to be invasive and no chemo. It doesn't tell you about the intention studies done by Lynn McTaggart about the power of 8 and how they're able to heal people from just standing around and thinking about them being better. You're not going to find that in one of your textbooks because that doesn't make the medical industry that is running everything, that doesn't make them any money.
Well, it's not. It's more than that. It doesn't make sense within the current paradigm. I think that's the other thing. I know these. I know a lot of these people. I know one of the leading scientists, and so one of the guys is a friend of mine, a scientist. He runs a cancer institute in Edinburgh. I've known him for many years. His wife is a Chinese acupuncturist, and he has a really open mind, right? But he's doing a lot of research in the sort of stuff that you might find horrific, RNA, all this stuff. But he keeps an open mind. He says everything's got a value, and he doesn't dismiss. His wife's just got a PhD in the use of acupuncture in chronic pain in gynecological patients up in Edinburgh. And this guy thinks that, he thinks there's value in it. But he's still working within a standard biochemistry paradigm. So I think it's not that that they're against it. A lot of them are open-minded, but it's like the day job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their day job is working within this particular area, which is science, where the parameters are set, and within those parameters, that's what they're working. Outside that, so within the day, I'm paid to practice Western medicine. I do a little bit of the other stuff, but basically, I'm trained and paid to practice Western medicine. And I do that. But I'm happy to do that. I find a lot of it is very helpful. But it doesn't mean I'm going to close my mind off the other things, and it also doesn't mean that I'm not aware of the problems with the medicine, with the way Western medicine's practiced. And I scratch my head about that. I scratch my head thinking about that a lot, because I can already see some of the problems that are developing within my profession.
So see, you've already been exposed to alternative methods of being able to diagnose your patients that you know are more effective. This is the thing, and the paradigm is what I'm talking about here. Now, you know what, and I'm not ignorant to the fact that there's a ton of people like you out there that just don't say anything and that just won't speak up. Either they're not surrounded by the same synchronicities you found in your life to be able to set you up for this idea, or they're not around a good support group, or they're around way too many people that are like, nope, just toe the line. You got to ignore that. You're going to be thrown in the loony bin if you keep telling people you're seeing their dad over their shoulder, and they just need to settle up with that rather than be on antidepressants. This model is not praised in the community. And if nothing else, and we're seeing this a ton right now with what's going on with alternate ideas on, and we're going to get into that in a minute. Let me just finish the point on this because I'm still curious about this paradigm thing. That, in my mind, is what's needed, right? Because yes, like you said, science is not settled. A lot of scientists, the settled science thing, whenever scientists say that, I'm like, you've just given up. You're obviously towing the line. You're making a lot of money on the back end of this by just saying the science is settled. Therefore, hey, public, that's not PhD people that don't do their own research and look into this stuff. Just trust us. We're going to give you a pill. You're going to feel better immediately. It's going to come back up in 6 months because we're only treating symptoms, because we know that they create, and you can't deny that the pharmaceutical industry is set up to create customers, not cures.
It's a business.
Yeah, okay, sure. But this is the thing. A paradigm shift is what is needed, and I know that you're on board with this as well.
Yeah.
Because the current paradigm, yes, is very, very, very skewed. It's very influenced, and it's very not helpful in an altruistic state. Because if you're given all methods because in your Hippocratic oath, you are taking an oath saying that you're going to do everything in your power to save this person and to do what's best for them. But the caveat to that is your Hippocratic oath is under this umbrella of options that you have. You're restricted as far as what you can do in doing anything in your power is kind of in air quotes. Yeah. Okay, but
no harm.
Then one would argue that you might be doing more harm by prescribing antidepressants to somebody rather than them going through a process.
This is the problem. Statistically, you probably are doing harm to some people, but you hope you're doing more good.
And not intentionally.
The question is, Yeah, this is the problem. I mean, you don't know, and a lot of the stuff I was doing, say, 30 years ago, you now know probably wasn't very good. We used to tell people to have a low fat and high carbohydrate diet, and now they're saying, "Oh gosh, we've been giving the wrong. Everyone's now diabetic because we told them to have a high carbohydrate diet." So I mean, it's very hard. I mean. So all they would say is, look, you can only work with the information you've got at the time, with the best of intentions. So that's the idea of professionalism, and that's the idea of having a codified body of knowledge, so that everybody can agree. Look, this is the best state of knowledge, and the people who are sensible within medicine and science know that there are limitations. They know they don't know everything, but I'm afraid there are some people who just do. I mean, they just take everything that they're sold and they just believe it, and then they make it into a religion, like scientism, really, isn't it? Which I think these people worship at the altar of science. They don't think that it's just a way of questioning things. It's a good way of questioning. It's got to. I mean, the fact we're talking together reliably shows the power of science. But there are other ways of looking at the world, and perhaps there are other sciences that we've either forgotten or that we haven't learned, things that will make more sense. I don't know. And saying I don't know is the first thing. I don't know.
Well, and you're a wonderful representative for this. And I want to make clear that we're just discussing the ideas and you're giving me clarity on these ideas. I think what you do is fantastic. And I think you are the bridge between the next step. I think that this is where we're going to go with this, because when you talk about knowledge that human beings have on the state of being of another human being, as far as treating them, as far as diagnosing and then figuring out what's going on, to everything available to you on planet Earth, then there is a knowledge base there. But you're not allowed to dip into a great deal of it from that perspective.
Let me tell you how I approached it. I thought, when I was having all these weird things happen to me, I thought I was heading towards healing rather than mediumship. I didn't know what the hell was happening. I thought, well, I'm a doctor. Maybe I'm going to become a healer. I mean, I really didn't know. I was a bit of a space cadet. I really, when these things happen to you, it's very destabilizing. I mean, and you can see it. You go through this space cadet phase where you're the guy getting someone in a corner at a party waving a celery stick at them, saying, "This is what happened to me." Yeah. Anyway, so I went to various healing centers, and I thought, you know what, this really isn't for me, because I can immediately see the pitfalls. Yeah, you could heal someone, but any of my colleagues will say, yeah, well, they were going to get better anyway, and it's not consistent. It's not, you can't put your hands on someone and say, definitely they're going to get healed. I mean, there were some amazing healers like Arrigo. I think in South America, in the 70s, he could, the surgeon of the rusty knife, he would extract cataracts ostensibly using a rusty knife. I think people have filmed him taking out cysts with his bare hands, and then they slow the film down. You can see him parting the skin. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, but that's what eyewitnesses say. And I've heard some pretty amazing eyewitness accounts from other things, from people I would certainly trust. So I wouldn't dismiss it. But from my point of view, I was on a personal exploration. And what I found was, first of all, if I did start diagnosing stuff that was sort of considered to be a bit not quite recognized by medicine, that would put me certainly in professional jeopardy. Also, to be honest, I was much more interested in mediumship. And the reason why, with mediumship, you've got instant feedback. So when I got into programming, in the old days, I mean, when I was a student, when you wrote a program, you had to have punched cards, stacked punched cards. You'd have to, which I never did, but all my colleagues at university, they used to have these IBM stacked punched cards. They used to do the program, write it out by hand. Someone would convert it into cards. They'd then take it to the computer center. Within a week, they'd get the output. And that would bore me witless. I couldn't do that. When I got into computing was when it was instant. I could write a piece of code, run it, see it, and get instant feedback. And that was a lot more sort of organic for me. And that's how I feel with mediumship. It's instant. You're only as ever good as your last message. For instance, yesterday I was speaking to a patient. Her husband died. And I'm on the phone to her. And I knew her husband really well, but I didn't know this bit. So I could just sense him then. He was saying, he showed me some gold coins in a box. And I thought, God, what's this about now? Because it's not like there's someone there telling you, tell her this and this. You've got to unpick the images in your mind. And I thought, oh, what's he going on about? So I said to her, I said, Linda, I've got him here, and he's going on about some money or something, and he's showing me. I said, and the reason why that is he's showing me some gold coins. I said, he doesn't collect gold coins, does he? She said, yeah, he did. He's got a load of old coins, old gold coins. Now, I tell you what, there was no way I expected him to do that, because he just wasn't the sort of guy I'd have thought would have done that. This guy was a really big, strapping guy, very opinionated. I mean, I got on with him really well, but I didn't think he'd be a numismatist, someone who collects old coins. So, I mean, she took great comfort in that. And that's instant feedback.
And these types of things are instant feedback. This is a wonderful way of being able to recognize that this is a real thing. Now, the repeatable nature of it is what is so tricky. And this is what's so tricky about all high strangeness, right? Is that it's not repeatable in the sense that you can go into a lab, that you can most things. So if I go out into my garage and I take my saw and I cut a piece of wood, that's pretty repeatable. Yeah. If I sit there and watch a tree grow, it's not going to grow in the same exact way every single time. It's going to have variations. The DNA, the way the branches form, all of these things are going to vary tree by tree by tree. It's still a damn tree. It's still a high strangeness phenomena, but it's not 100% identically repeatable, other than something that you've introduced as like a fake or what is the word? Inauthentic. What is the word I'm looking for here? Anyway, you get what I'm saying. It's not real. Yeah. So these types of things in nature or high strangeness, they follow a similar pattern to where they have a predictable type of an outcome, but not predictably incited type of an outcome. Yeah. Now, they're starting to do things like this with the CE5 groups that bring in UFOs and stuff. They're starting to work with intention. Yes, and then you've got, like I said, Lynn McTaggart. They're starting to explore these ideas and these options. What the issue I've got, and because I want to mention again that this is not 100%. This is a very tiny, tiny sliver of people that control the mandates. And so now we're talking about a more conspiratorial element to the medical industry. And examples abound, man. Like I said, you've got people shutting down Chinese healers that can cure with their hands and just shutting them down. There are rumors and stories and documents that go back telling about entire swaths of rainforest that were cut down after a doctor immediately found the cure for cancer, published his paper, the doctor turned up murdered, and the forest ends up swiped out. That is not a coincidence. So things like that. And then as well, things like the Bayer Corporation. So if it was really about your health, let's walk down this real quick, because this is something that just came to my mind this year, is Roundup is made by the Bayer Corporation. They make the #1 heart medicine on the planet. Okay, Roundup, what does that do?
Oh, do you mean Roundup? No, I don't know. No, Roundup the drug or Roundup the chemical that you spray on?
It's interesting you put crops. It that way. Roundup, the one that you spray on crops, it's a weed killer. Okay.
Yeah. So Roundup is the thing which isn't that the one which kills lots of weeds? And what they do, they introduce a resistant gene into the various seed crops, so it resists Roundup. So you can up the dose. Yeah, is that what we're talking about here?
It is what we're saying. That's a part of it, but it's made. So Roundup is made by Bayer. Bayer Corporation makes the #1 distributed heart medicine on the planet. Roundup kills weeds. The #1 heart medicine on the planet is dandelion tea. You could take dandelion roots. It's way better than anything Bayer could ever come up with. Right. But they're making a product that kills. What cures you in nature.
I didn't know about dandelion tea, but I mean, I have a friend. Again, she's a herbalist, and she's got lots of
ask her about things. It.
Yeah, well, actually, she's been very helpful because when I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, she immediately said, you need these various supplements and this, that, and the other. So I looked into it, and she knew what she was going on about. And I mean, the other thing I've just read lately is prunes. Now they've found have got enormous benefit for bones. So I'm taking prunes every day. Prunes have a rather strong effect on my stomach. So
are we going to?
Everything's got side effects, Brandon.
Do we need a break every half hour?
No,
are you going to make it? Okay.
No. I just got Just got my kombucha here. That's all. So
Okay, fair enough. But this is the thing, right? And this is one of the issues I've got with this. And this is what I think, though, also is coming to light. So we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing actual remedies come out. I know that there's been a much bigger swing, and there's a bunch of arguments about why this is happening. Whether we're going through some sort of spiritual awakening, whether we're transferring into some dimension that's different, and things like this are coming more to light. So the point I want to finish up on this part of the medical thing, and then we'll move on, is that the influence from things start at its beginning, at our establishment into this world, right? You're brought up, if you don't have a grandma around or a Meemaw that grew up with, castor oil, or that will go out into the yard and pick dandelions for you because you've got a heart problem, then what you are at the mercy of is advertisements, at the mercy of the system saying that's obviously skewed. A small part of it is skewed. Even though people like you have the best of intentions, you're working within a system. So that system trains you and all human beings from an early age that you need doctors and you need pills and you can't heal from plants outside. You've got to go somewhere and go see Dr. Ian Rubenstein, and then he'll help you out. So how much of what actually benefits people is a placebo effect?
Oh, well, now you're talking. I mean, I've actually had a paper published in the British Medical Journal about placebos, because I think placebos are underutilized. First of all, it's medicine's dirty little secret. I mean, if 30% of people get better on a placebo for lots of things, why on earth aren't we using placebos?
Right.
So the answer is well, you're lying to patients. Well, first of all, so a guy, Rudy Pitroff, who's a doctor my wife worked with, he came up with an idea. He's a very unusual thinker. He said, well, hang on. If you actually look at the particular placebo that was used in a randomized controlled trial, and if you know that, say, 30% of your patients got better on that, then you can say that particular placebo made 30% of people better. So if you gave that particular placebo, you wouldn't be lying. Which is very interesting, because you can say that's
very interesting.
Work. Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic, a really good way of looking at it. But it always occurred to me that if we're talking about a ritualized system, and it's obviously the placebo is not the placebo, it's our innate healing powers, the intelligence of our body that actually heals, that we're stimulating. And that's actually what drugs do. I mean, a lot of the drugs that we give to people they just target receptors on the cell and they stimulate them, and it's the cell that does the work. So, it's all receptors and keys in locks. You turn the key and it unlocks the effect. And they're now talking that maybe in the future you'll be able to electrostimulate various parts of the blood pressure. You electrically stimulate the carotid artery, the carotid sinus here, and that can lower your blood pressure. So there's all sorts of techniques coming along that Western medicine's considering. But if it's the ritualized aspect, it occurred to me that maybe you can tell the patient it's a placebo and they'll get better. And I think there's a guy called Professor Erwin Kirsch or someone like this who did a trial, and he discovered you can tell people it's a placebo and they still get better. And not only that, if you give people a red color pill, it's better for relieving pain. If you give them a blue color pill, it's better for calming the nerves. So now we're into really wacky color therapy stuff that maybe has actually got some basis in fact. And I'm all for it. When I was a young doctor, there used to be, you could still prescribe tonics to patients. And there was, I'll tell you two stories here. Before I ever gave people antidepressant, a lot of people do want you to prescribe. And there's a psychotherapist called Michael Balint, who I've trained under this system, who talks about the drug being the doctor, and that when the doctor gives a prescription or a bottle of medicine, he's giving a little bit of himself, his love, his attention in that bottle, and that's what's really doing the healing. And I would often give people a tonic, especially if they're of a certain age. So when I started in medicine, a lot of the elderly people I looked after grew up in the days of bitter tonics, and the more bitter it was, the better it was for you. So I'd give something called Mr. Gent Alk, which is gentian alkaline mixture, which is foul. And I'd say, well, this was known by the Romans, and my predecessor, Dr. Barnes, used to give it, and a lot of people swore by it. And and it's horrible. And every time you drink you have a spoonful of it, you can curse my name because it's so bitter. And they'd always say, I would never curse your name, Don. But it often worked. And I'm now going to tell you, this is a real true story. Before I was working at my practice in Enfield in North London, I was a student health doctor at the London School of Economics just for 1 year. It was fascinating. That's why I learned. A third of my patients were Americans, really bright, London School of Economics. Some of them were even CIA operatives. And I remember I saw a woman, she was my age, about 27, and she said, "Can you give me some indomethacin?" And I said, "Why do you need indomethacin?" And she said, "Well, I had a back injury. I was in the services." I said, "What happened?" She said, "I was pushed off a cliff." And I said, "Well, can you tell me why were you pushed off a cliff?" And she literally said, "If I told you, I'd have to kill you."
Damn.
And I said to my boss, "What was that about?" He said, "Oh, she's CIA." I said, "What do you mean CIA?" He said, "Well, what happens at the LSE? We have, if CIA people are injured, they become analysts and they train at the LSE. And we also have Russian KGB people here as well. So I had Russians and American agents looking after them. Anyway, so that's a nice story. But the other story was I had this African guy. This is a guy with a PhD, okay? Really clever guy, Nigerian guy. And he came to see me one day. And he said, and this was before Viagra, okay? You've got to understand. So if you can think back to, because before Viagra, men never came with erection problems, okay? That changed everything.
Pun intended,
okay?
Right?
Yeah, okay, right. No, this is true, okay? So he came to see me. He said, "Doctor, I'm getting married tomorrow." I said, "Yes." He said, "I want something to make me strong." Well, what's he going on about? I didn't know that. I thought, what? Can you make you strong? Like spinach, like Popeye? No, for the wedding night. I thought, oh my God. So I thought, what do I do? Because, he obviously was feeling anxious. I thought, okay. We had a little pharmaceutical room, and there were two things. There was magnesium mixture for indigestion and potassium citrate. And when you mix them together, I didn't know what would happen, but I thought they're bound to do something. So I said, "I've got these two potions. I'm going to mix them together." I mean, he looked at it, I put it in a little jar, and it foamed up like semen. And I said, "Look, you do this before the wedding night, and you drink it down. It'll make you very strong." So he did that. And then came back a week later and said, "Doctor, you made me very strong. It was great." Thank you. So, no, look,
So you're making your own boner medicine now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I was, the guy came from a culture where this is what happened. He expected that. Okay. Yep. And I you might say I was being patronizing, but I felt that for me to just say, "Oh, go away, this is a load of rubbish. We've got nothing." I thought that's not going to be helpful. So I sort of got into his mindset. I thought, well, let's play along this and see what we get. I mean, some doctors would say, "Well, you're just kidding the guy, and that was a terrible thing to do." But he was happy. It cost nothing, and it helped him. So and I thought that was pretty cool actually at the time. So did he. But there we go.
It is extremely cool, but for the same reasons why it was beneficial is the same reasons why I think that you don't see more of it. Now, what you said is he expected, that was his culture, right? This is the point I wanted to make about placebo, so you've slipped it in here perfectly. Placebos possibly, and the way that I look at them is they're not necessarily nothing that's doing something. That's an idea, but the way that I look at it, it's more a suggestive influence that convinces you that whatever you are about to put in your body is going to solve why you're feeling bad, right? Okay, so it's that clear cut. So all it is, therefore, is an influence on your psyche that then makes the body heal itself in a placebo account, but also nocebos work that way as well. So the psychological element to this is what's so fascinating to me. Now, back to the cultural part of it. If you were to introduce a bunch of drugs and things like that into Africa, they don't understand it. They don't understand that that's a cultural thing. Plus, a lot of the drugs we introduce over there, if you look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have killed and sterilized a shitload of Africans. So now not only did they not be raised with that because their culture's not that, when people came in, outsiders came in with this new information, it did horrible things for their village and for their people. So now they've got an even bigger distrust of this type of ideology because that's all this is. It's an ideology that is skewed based on an influence to make more money. So do you think that the placebo effect, as far as Western cultures being told and influenced that the only way to get better is to go to a doctor, to get pills, to get shots, and to make sure that you do it that way. Ignore these people that are pulling plants out of their backyard and doing that. That's silly. We don't, in our culture, it is very, of course, we're generalizing here, but the vast amount of people think that that is a silly practice. And why don't you just go to the store and pick up some Tylenol? Because that's a cultural placebo. They expect that to work.
This is where I take issue. Now, I'm not about the medical profession. I think people will always want to see somebody else to make them better.
Yes, this is true. But the cultural aspect of this is that our culture has been conditioned that, yes, when you do go seek this knowledge elsewhere because you don't have it, the only place that you can go, culturally influenced, which is a placebo, this is an influence, you're not going to get better unless you go see a doctor. Don't go see the chick down the street with the little, psychic palm reading thing in the corner where she has a bunch of herbs that will actually cure you. The thought that those kind of things don't work and that they're not repeatable may be because our society has a placebo effect. There's a blanket over
nocebo
everybody.
Effect.
Well, either way, it's a
Yeah.
nocebo or a placebo. The placebo part of it is you need these things to make you better, and the plants in the backyard don't do it. And those silly bush people over there, they don't know what the hell they're doing. That's why they die all the time, which is not accurate. They know cures for a ton of stuff. If you look at sapo, have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, it's a South American practice where they use frogs. And there's this one particular type of frog that secretes, it's not a psychoactive thing at all.
So the one you lick it?
Kind of. So this has a secretion whenever it gets attacked. So they do this, and they're very gentle on the frogs because they want to keep them around. So they take care of them. So they scrape this ooze off of them. They mix it with the spit of the shaman, let it dry into a paste. They burn your arm, and then they put a swab of it in there. Okay, so what this does is that this introduces antibiotic properties and healing properties into the body that aren't found on a bottle marked Tylenol, that aren't found in a prescription pad, but it works, and it works very, very well. This culture knows that that's the way to heal itself. If you were to introduce a bottle of pills to them, they would know what to do, and they would probably have horrible adverse reactions. It seems to me that in the medical industry and culturally specifically, you could see these pockets of people that have only been influenced by their ideologies. They all work. So if everything works, but they're at conflicting ideologies, what the hell's going on? It's obviously some sort of placebo or some sort of influenced effect.
I think you can make a case for understanding how the placebo effect works. I mean, we know that the psychoneuroimmunology, we now talk about the link between your psychologicals, your frame of mind, the underlying neurology, and how immune cells come to the brain and get programmed. I mean, that wasn't known when I was at medical school. People now know there are links there, so you can understand it. Actually, what I think it is more, Brandon, is the use of science by by dumb people. I'll say it.
Or by people that are motivated by a certain monetary gain to skew the results.
And if you're a drug company, you've got monetary gain. There's no doubt about it. You're going down a certain pathway. It's not. I mean, you can call it a conspiracy if you want, but it actually. They take it upon themselves to make money out of selling drugs.
Yep, and you can't sue them if something happens to you, so they're protected.
Set in stone, isn't it? After that, but for other people, ought to think, well, maybe that's just one way of approaching the problem. There are other ways of approaching the problem, and I feel you've got to have more than one arrow in your quiver. If you want to have a martial analogy for medicine, which perhaps not the best analogy.
It's perfect. I agree with that because you need multiple options. But this is the thing. If you train culture, and again, we're generalizing here, but the problem is the reason it's sustainable and that this is the model that's in place right now is because so many people, to the placebo, nocebo, the influenced effect on society. You've been told from our cultures that you have to go to this person to get better. And if you don't go to this person, you won't get better. Therefore, that mindset creates a need. Okay? It's not necessarily true. It's just what people have been told. Therefore, they believe it. Therefore,
but not only that, now we've got into this thing of credentialing in society. Everything has to be credentialed to the point where it becomes crazy. Even if you're a credentialed professional, you still have to be even more credentialed, and you end up doing pointless online courses for pointless things just to maintain credentialing. I mean, it becomes these things. I don't actually think they're conspiratorial. I actually think the system's set up and it snowballs. Sure, there are people who, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, conspiracies occur every single level, and if you're in business gets together to make a profit, you can call that a conspiracy if you want. But I think the system is actually broken, and I think it's not working properly, and I think you end up with unintended consequences. Fine. You might say some that are intended. I don't know. We could discuss that.
We can definitely, that is a direction I would like to go.
Yeah,
And I agree with you. So, but that's the thing. If they're only told that this is what you can do, then, under penalty of whatever, losing your license, something like that, then that's clearly going against the Hippocratic Oath. But
it's not even that. It's not even that. Just the mindset. I mean, let's segue to the UFO thing, okay?
Hell yeah.
Self-censorship. The minute UFOs are mentioned, you get the X-Files music and raised eyebrows and people sniggering. Why? I've just been reading Ross Coulthart's book, In Plain Sight. You know Ross Coulthart?
Yeah.
He's a brilliant guy. He's a top Australian journalist. I mean, the modern water Cronkite of Australian news. And he's been interested in UFOs for ages. And and he was saying that, where people thought he was crazy. Why? Because, well, why? It's a good news story. It's become self-censorship. I mean, you just have to. I mean, what to say? The world is the matrix. In the Matrix, the world is the illusion that's been pulled over your eyes. I mean, and then you're stuck in it, and there's no other way of thinking. That's the best way of doing it.
You're right, and that is kind of the idea of the model, but there are holes in the theory, and the more that you train yourself to look for these holes, the more evident they become. So, that saying, real eyes realize real lies, right? So whenever you start to see these things, you see them now all around you, and you can clearly see the influence that they have. It's the allegory of the cave by Plato, right? There are people that are sitting there watching the shadows. One decides to leave. He tries to tell them what's going on. They think he's full of shit. That's what I think is going on in our world right now. So it leads us now to what we probably need to close on, and we'll see how fast we can do this. We've already burned through an hour, dude.
Have we? No.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. I'm telling you, and I could do a third episode with you because we've only got kind of a foundation set up. We could just you and I should just do a whole damn show on this. So, I mean, like our own podcast. So, okay, let's talk about the influence of what's going on right now, and if there is malicious intent occurring, which I do think that there is. I think that there's way too much evidence to talk against that. So let's talk about the current model of what's happening now. So, do you think that the situation that we find ourselves in medically right now with what's going on globally, and we all know what I'm talking about, do you think that this was done accidentally or on purpose?
I'm coming to the conclusion that it was, well, first of all, you've got to understand
I don't know is a great answer too.
No,
I mean, you don't have to have this determined. Just based on
the preamble to this would be is that this has been talked about for years. We've had every 8 years or so, we've had a coronavirus outbreak. Which have been controlled. This one, and people were saying, look, it's going to get out of hand. I mean, I've been to lectures, countless times. They're saying the next pandemic, we need to be prepared for it. We've got 7 billion human beings. Whenever you have a lot more animals around than you had before, that means there's going to be some outbreak of something. It's amazing we haven't had this before. Well, we have had this before. 100 years ago, you had the flu pandemic. Was it released on purpose? I personally, I don't think so, because it's a very bad bioweapon. The lab leak hypothesis you got slated for a year ago if you talked about it, but now people are saying, it seems possible that there was a leak from the Wuhan lab. I mean, I don't know. But it was a really bad bioweapon. I mean, if you want to release a bioweapon, you don't want to do, this is not a good bioweapon. A good bioweapon will kill people instantly.
Yeah.
And go very quickly. So I don't think it's a good bioweapon. I mean, I think this was a catastrophe. If it was a lab leak, I think it wasn't done intentionally. But I mean, the answer is I don't know. I mean, I've just seen the consequence of whatever it is, and it's not pretty.
So are you a germ theory or a terrain theory guy? You're more germ theory, right?
Well, no. I mean, look. It's not one or the other. I'm an everything man. I mean,
Well, one contradicts the other. One tells that viruses are transmissible, and one tells that viruses are always in the body.
No. Look, I mean, viruses exist. They cause disease. I know people who've spent their entire life working on them and can produce disease at will in test animals.
But to be fair, through the model of the box that they're given to dump out on the table and play with.
But you can actually give it to an animal and kill them or make them sick. or you can give it to a person and make them ill. I mean, there was the cold research in the UK. There was the cold research facility which spent 50 years trying to cure the common cold. They never managed it. But what they did manage to do was to give people colds consistently, and they would give them colds. They'd introduce the virus, and they get a cold, and you could dose it, and they get the cold. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But some people wouldn't get the cold.
Well, there
because
are other,
they had an innate immunity.
Well, or there are other studies done where they did this. The U.S. military did this, where they had coronavirus studies. This was way back in the day. And they would spit in people's mouths. They would take swabs from verified infected people, transfer this, have them breathe all over each other. No one ever transmitted the virus. Not one. It's
I
not.
don't know. I'd have to
So
look at
this is
studies,
the difference in German terrain theory, which is why that they're pretty interesting theories and why they're so at odds with each other, because each sets up a foundation for your understanding about how the world works around you. And if all you've been told is that viruses are transmissible, therefore you can catch them, therefore we have to lock people down and all that, that framework would skew how you would approach any of that stuff, how you would interact with your life.
Terrain theory would see viruses as I understand it, as a result
of stress in the body, toxins being removed once a year, which happens in winter for everyone, and everybody kind of goes through this shedding experience. Ancients used to praise it and look forward to it. The idea is it's not necessarily transmissible. It's that in the wintertime, we have lack of sunlight, shorter days, you have colder weather, you've got, less activity outside, so you're less active, you've got less vitamin D coming in naturally from the sun. So therefore, this is a natural time where everybody sheds.
I can take all that, but they are transmissible. There's just no doubt. I mean, that is something which you can transmit it.
This is what I find fascinating.
No. I mean, you've done it. I mean, I've done it. I've seen it happen. I've worked with it. I've actually seen it occur in real life. I mean, you can do it in the lab. I mean,
you can do a lot in the lab.
Look.
So let's say, for instance, whenever they do rat studies, the condition of the rats or their mental state, which is something you have mentioned about your patients, and I do agree with. I think that that's very, very important. Their mental state has a lot to do with how the studies are what the results of the studies are. So if you're saying that you have a rat in a place that it's sick, it's nasty, it's getting shit on by other diseased rats that are in a very stressful and low vibration type of a atmosphere, cytokines are being released within that mammal, then you're shooting it up with experimental stuff that's stressing out, that's shocking the system of an already stressed entity. Yes, you are going to get some pretty dramatic results to the fact that things kind of suck for that animal. You can do this with humans as well. One example of in the labs experiments being skewed by environment. That's very important, and you know this. So
Yeah.
one of the experiences, what they did with opiates on rats, okay? So they had a poor rat by itself in a cage. They gave it a water bottle, 2 water bottles. One had nothing but water in it. The other one had heroin in it, okay? An opioid. That rat... And this is how they proved the war on drugs, by the way. This is how they set up laws for war on drugs. That rat would go to that morphine and just drink the hell out of it until it killed over and died. Now, another doctor found that wasn't a fair environment for the study to be participated in accurately. So what he did was he created something called Rat Park. Have you heard of this study? Okay, so Rat Park is what they would do is they set up the exact same experiment. They had 2 water bottles, one with just water, one with morphine, an addictive substance. But what they did was they expanded the cage. Okay, so now their enclosure is much larger. They put other rats in there, so now they can, mate, they can have sex and play around. They put toys, they put adventures, puzzles for them to figure out. They created an environment that was stimulating in other ways. The amount of rats that went over to the morphine water and drank it until they died is 0.
Yeah.
So
I'm not quite sure what this has got to do with viruses and germ theory.
What this means is whatever the condition in the lab is, those results that can be then published and told to the public based on an expectation can be skewed. So even lab results can be skewed. Doctors can be bought. You can't, but doctors can be bought to say that things are a certain way.
That can happen, but most scientists are well-intentioned and working at the coalface. Look, I know people who are virologists, who are microbiologists, who deal with this all the time. It would be like to them. It would be like saying, "Look, cars don't exist, or wheels can't turn round." I mean, you realise what you're saying. It's pretty much. I mean, these people can look inside a cell. They can actually. You can build a virus from scratch. And you can actually watch it infect a cell. You can watch it multiplying. You can watch the cell bursting open. In Russia, they develop bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria, and they use them instead of antibiotics. And then now there's a lot of research going, a lot of thought that maybe we ought to be using bacteriophages, viruses, to treat infections rather than antibiotics. That's something that needs research. I mean, if you're trying to convince me that cars don't exist or wheels don't go around, I'm not going to go there, Brandon, because my worldview is such that I absolutely, totally believe in that stuff.
I love it. And no, you're absolutely right. But this is the equivalent of one creating a wheel and not putting a hub on it, not putting a center point to where it could roll. Now, all you're being told is that's a wheel and it can roll. But in the lab, if they put a hub in it, yes, it does roll. But that is a skewed experiment. What if they deny you that hub? Therefore, you don't see the results that would obviously yield what you're looking for. What I mean is that the experiment is skewed from the beginning. It is set up to create results that they're expecting.
Experiments, obviously, limit the conditions because that's how you do it. But look, I mean, you're not going to convince me viruses don't exist and the germ theory doesn't exist. But the idea of you call it terrain theory, I call it soil and seed.
Yeah, okay.
In order to have an outcome, you need the right soil with the right seed. So, I mean, if you've got a healthy immune system, and if there's all sorts of, and you're feeling good, and you've got all sorts of other stuff going on in your life, you're going to be well prepped up to prevent this. But I mean, in terms of the way I understand how life works, which is in the mechanistic view of life, the stuff you can see, I mean, it all makes perfect sense. I mean, it hangs together so well. I mean, when you've gone, it all makes sense. It makes so much sense. It's not a matter of conspiracy. It's the best model of reality to explain what we see that we have. Now, I think it's a pretty good model. I don't think it's the only model. Where I wouldn't say it's the wrong model. I'd say it's one model. There are other ways of modeling it, and they've all got something to offer it. But I'm not going to junk a model that I think is. Look, I mean, I've got patients who remember. They would have one of 13 children because a lot of their brothers and sisters died of infection. I still remember when I first went to medicine that people would regularly have massive heart attacks and very dense paralysis on one side because they had strokes. And in my lifetime, I've seen how medicine has progressed, and that we don't see those sort of strokes anymore because we're better at controlling blood pressure and other factors. We don't see so many massive heart attacks now because we can prevent them or we can stop them getting bad. That's good. I mean, it's expensive, and you could argue there are other ways of doing it, but it is effective if you're limiting yourself to that. At the same time, I've also seen massive amounts of type 2 diabetes go up because probably our crappy lifestyle and our crappy diets. So I'm not a gung-ho enthusiast for the Western lifestyle, but I wouldn't junk it away. I mean, if you suddenly got rid of all the stuff that we were Western medicine and stuff, you'd have an awful lot of dead people, a lot of people in pain from their arthritic hips. I mean, we have a rosy view of natural man, but if you actually look at what the natural state is, I think some anthropologists went into the rainforest and they were amazed that these guys still had their teeth. Yeah. Because all of them had lost their teeth. They were 40. And these guys had good dentition from healthy dentistry. So look, there's a very, very good point you're making. But I mean, you have to accept the fact that science also makes a very good point. We need a synthesis of them. We need one to inform the other. But if you throw one out completely, you're going to be like one wheel on your wagon rather than two. I think you need both.
And I'm with you. Now, I've got to also be clear on this and just say I just have a knowledge of the ideas just because I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. So it is entirely possible, though, that both are correct. And this is what's so fascinating to me about this reality, without getting too metaphysical on it.
No, let's get metaphysical. No, this is good. So we had this discussion before that we could actually be living in separate reality. Now, I love this sort of stuff. This is up for debate. I often had this. I've had this thought in my mind that when I meet someone, and I've had this for many years. How do I know that we're in the same universe?
Yes. These kinds of ideas.
It might be that we may be able to agree on every point, because you'll never know, obviously, because it has to be self-consistent. But it might be that something we haven't talked about, that in one of your ancestors, they came from a place where there were goblins and hobbits, and how do we know? I mean, although it sounds completely barking mad, that one way of looking at the universe is that there's no such thing as time and there's no such thing as space. What you've got is a mathematical space of all the possible arrangements of all the energy and molecules in the world. So imagine that every possible arrangement of atoms, say, exists out there. And then what our consciousness does is it navigates through this phase space of different arrangements. And so we all navigate through a separate, slightly different universe. But where they overlap, because when we meet, the arrangements are the same, we have to agree on certain things.
You've hit on it. No, you've hit on it. This is exactly it. This is why this is the perfect conversation, is because this is the next thing that I wanted to say. So yes, I do agree with this, that we are all living realities where contradictory points. I mean, we see dichotomy all over the place, right? Hot, cold, dark, light. These are baseline dichotomies that exist here for us to have difference of opinion and different observation so that we can kind of, have whatever kind of experience that we're here to have. Now, to the point of terrain theory versus germ theory, Western medicine versus allopathic, any of it. You've got placebos versus other things, nocebos, okay? All of these things do exist, and all of them are repeatable for the most part, depending on the constitution of the individual viewing it, okay? So the old example is that two people are standing across from each other. There's a 6 painted on the floor to where both of them can see it. From one perspective, that's a 6. From the other perspective, that's a 9.
It's a 9.
They are both correct. This is what I find most interesting. So basically, your entire experience of life, as it relates to medicine specifically on this, you have to be convinced that this is the way that it works. If you were to walk around and go, like you said, to the Amazon, their teeth are all better, they breathe better, they understand the natural ways of healing.
I wasn't saying that. I'm saying that the anthropologists' teeth were better. The Amazonians were amazed that these people were older than them and still had their teeth.
But there are tribes, though. There are examples of tribes out there who have way healthier immune systems than we do. They can handle anything. They've never taken an aspirin in their life, and they are or a vaccine, by the way, and they are way healthier than anybody. They live forever, all of this good stuff based on their environment conditions and the mindset of understandings of that culture at the time. Our mindset at this time, a vast majority, again, we're generalizing, is that you have to have Western medicine, you've got to get vaccines, you've got to do this stuff, you can't heal yourself on your own. There's a split, though, because there's a lot of people that say that's not accurate at all. So, and they're 100% right. There's a lot of people also, this new thing came out about the Spanish flu. It's funny you mentioned that a minute ago, that it didn't start in Spain at all, that it started in the US, and it wasn't a flu, it was a bacteria. There is evidence that proves this, and they can prove it. But then there's people that say the opposite of that. This is what I find so fascinating about this reality, is that there are differences of opinion. You can have 100% proof that the globe is round. You can have 100% proof and convincing argument that the earth is flat. It's then just based on what resonates with you and what understanding works.
But I don't know. The other question is consensus reality.
Yes.
It's reality. Now, this is just free-flowing ideas. So, I'm not sure. But the idea that maybe if you have enough people agreeing on a certain model, then it will come to fruition. But then the question is who are you, Brandon? Because if you then look at reincarnation, and if you then take the point of view as I do, that time isn't exactly real,
I agree with
you may be a multi-headed, multi-dimensional being.
Hell yeah.
And then what is consensus reality? Is it Brandon here? Is there a different version of you that's got different idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how does that work?
Well,
how does it work?
It works because it's based on your perception, ideology, and what vibration you are focused down to. So, there's a lot of people who have the perception that nobody else is here but you and God, right? There's only two things here, which you are God. Okay, this consensus reality is something I'm very interested in. Again, I'm glad you hit on it. What if consensus reality is a real thing, which I completely agree it is, then it therefore can be influenced. And therefore, people who want to control this world know that about you, know that about people and humanity. And therefore, they could set up a consensus reality that most people agree to. Again, with what's going on right now, with this jab, no jab, with the corona, no corona, with people getting sick, other people having no problems whatsoever, there's some arguments to be said that this has been an influenced attack on the psyche, and therefore that's what the real pandemic is. It's not a medical thing, technically. It's a psychological thing that we're all just kind of investing energy in and therefore creating it.
But I don't know. But I mean, talking about creating reality, you've heard of the Hawaiian system of Ho'oponopono, I think it's pronounced.
I believe so. Go over.
Yeah, there's a book I was reading. This guy, there was a prison in the States. It had the most horrible people in it. It was a psychiatric prison, and this one of the orderlies there, he would sit there and he would just do nothing. But wherever he was, suddenly within 6 months, they'd all got better. The atmosphere had got better. The inmates were getting better, and they realised that there was something this guy was doing. And what was he doing? He said, "I was apologising." So I said, "What do you mean apologising?" He said, "Well, I was thinking about the situation, apologising." He said, "Why? It's not your fault." He said, "Of course it's my fault." He said, "If it's in my reality,
Yes,
I'm partly responsible for it. If I change myself and apologise for it, that will ripple out." So
this is where the nefarious understanding comes into play. If this is accurate, if things like this gentleman's answer, and I completely agree with it, Lynn McTaggart's work, again to mention her because of the intention studies, what if this was the consensus reality? What if this was the way that life existed? There's no pharmaceutical companies telling you that this is your only option. What if we lived in a coherent world to where the consensus consciousness is that there are natural ways to heal each other, that we can actually do this in a group mental state? Now, this would have to be cultivated from generations early. This would have to be taught straight out the gate. The same way that we ended up in the consensus reality we have now is by being told that this is the way things work. When there are contradictions abound in this model, where this is not the way things work, this is not the only option. But when you're told that, that's what you expect. Therefore, that's what's created. And this is the part of this whole situation that's going on with whatever you feel about it, that I feel that it's been engineered to be a psychological thing that we all create. It's this co-collective creative type of environment. You can influence somebody, therefore, that convinces themselves that their reality is this way. Now, if you can do that on a scale of a society, you run the world. You end up with this division type dichotomy because they understand that it is all of these things existing at the same place. It's just what you believe in, what resonates with you is what focuses with you. If you then tell people that they should be scared shitless and that everything's out to get them and that they're going to die if they don't blank, and enough people start to believe that, they create it on this place. The concept of tulpas, the concept of thinking thought forms and then manifesting in reality. The thought of placebos making you better just simply because you have an understanding or you've been told that it would do so. I think the psychological factor on what's going on on us as a society here is what's been hijacked. And that's the most interesting thing to me. If it is a 6 and a 9 at the same exact time, somebody has figured out that you can just tell people that it's one or the other and they'll believe it. And that leaves then no opportunity for that to be discussed any further, and that there's no option that it could be anything else. And this is where I think that we find ourselves now, in this state of confusion.
The important thing is to keep your mind flexible and be open to opportunity. Now, I mean, I don't buy everything you're saying, but I can see where you're coming at. I'm not sure.
I come at it from a desire of understanding. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. And from your perspective, I'm curious about what you think about everything going on.
What I think is, I mean, I've been stuck in this pandemic, and it's I've seen colleagues die from it. I've seen people get really ill from it. I have patients die from it. I've had a woman who refused to have a vaccine, and she's absolutely adamant she wouldn't have it. She's actually now in her 3rd week of COVID, and she's begging me to make her better, and I can't. And you know, we talked frankly. She said I wish I'd had the vaccine. So I mean, I don't know. For you, it's theoretical. I mean, it's lovely to talk about this stuff, and I agree with. But when because it's not. I mean, okay, living in a society, you know, having to make adjustments, that's not theoretical. But for me, this is so in my face. It's so raw. It's so real. When you see colleagues dying or patients dying that you've known, it is pretty frightening. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's not. People aren't dying from a state of mind. They're dying from something that's got them. I mean, I've had people who are absolutely adamant they were not going to get this. This is a load of rubbish. It's just they've been poleaxed by it. And then they are the very next people who say, "Oh, wish I hadn't listened to this." So I think you've got to be very careful, you know, with these thoughts are interesting thoughts, but I don't think in any way they should influence health policy. I really don't, because I think the pandemic is a real and present danger, and I think it's great. You know, I have a friend who's a healer, and one thing he said to me is, "It's an insult to speak philosophy to starving man. In other words, you feed the man first. It's already well saying, well, we can grow through this, we've got to do it this way and the other. Feed the man first, and then you can talk philosophy. I think we're at the point now where you need to do something. And personally, I'm very pro-vaccine, and you will not shake me. I've seen in the UK this time last year. I mean, I get the positive swabs come through, on my system. I can see how many swabs there are. This time last year, the COVID positive swabs, my patients were dying or being in hospital. We were being, ambulances were queuing up outside hospitals. Now, I'm still getting positive swabs, but they're just not, you're finding out, I'm not that ill, actually. Do you have the vaccine? Yeah, I had the vaccine. Okay, fine. And the people who haven't had the vaccine, they're the ones who are dead ill. And we haven't got the number of people in hospital. So I see that as a triumph, Brandon. I'm sorry. You won't convince me otherwise.
No, and we're just talking about the ideas here. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. But what I will say is I do want to talk about the vax with you real quick. Again, we should do 20 episodes on this. So
okay, yeah.
Let's talk about I agree with you that you've got to feed the man before you can talk philosophy, but then the question becomes is what do you tell him is nutrition? Do you tell him what's good for him and offer him a McDonald's burger or a Burger King burger, and therefore, again, coercion? You've gotten two shitty options. You get to pick, but you get to pick between two shitty things. Or do you let him make up his mind and you give him an apple versus a burger? What do you think? But there's going to be preference. People are going to pick the burger, and that's fine, and people are going to pick the apple, and that's fine too. Then we can talk about the philosophies. But I do think that there's an element of societal consciousness that has been hijacked here. And I know this, or what leads me to this idea is simply because on the news, all you hear, again, we've got to... all of this is predicated under the framework that people in a society can be influenced by information that they're given independent of any research that they do, okay? So with that understanding, the news kept telling everyone, social distance, mask, don't go outside, don't be around anybody else, and then eventually get your vaccine, okay? Those were the options that your medical care professionals were telling you to do, when in reality, what would actually benefit everybody and get us back to whatever the hell is over this thing is exercise, 8 hours of sleep, sunlight, eating right, socially connecting to people, digging your hands in the dirt, which is where microbiome is found. When people walk around and sanitize the piss out of their hands, they're knocking all of that good bacteria off of them, which is fuel for our immune system. Stress, these create cytokine storms. So when you lock people up, when you threaten their jobs, when you threaten their social, this is where I think you're seeing most of the sickness. You're seeing a breakdown in the human spirit.
These are valid points. I mean, we didn't have such draconian lockdown in the UK. I mean, when the first lockdown, I was out walking I live in London, but it's on the edge of it. I was out walking the fields. It was hot. It was sunny. It was lovely. The air was pure. There were no traffic. It was quite pleasant. But of course, if you live in a block of apartments and you've got no,
which is already a more stressful environment.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
See, already you're geared toward that constitution, right? It's got to do with your constitution.
I mean, remember when this virus hit, no one knew exactly how it was going to behave. I mean, we now know that it's errors the current prevailing view is it's in the air, and that you need to change it. I mean, I've always been a great believer in ventilation. In my office, when I had designed my office, I had two windows at right angles to each other, and I said to maintain airflow. My colleagues thought I was bonkers, but I've always had a feel that I don't want air conditioning on. I want airflow.
You and I are similar in this way too. I have to have fans and stuff on. I'm the same, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so I've always felt that. But when it hit, no one knew what the hell it was. I mean, we knew it was a virus, but no one knew how it would behave. No one knew how lethal it was. I mean, I actually saw the science developing. And reading it all, people were confused. I mean, it was very similar to the HIV epidemic in the 1980s. When HIV appeared, no one knew what the hell it was. There were all sorts of things, but then it was very slow. I mean, because the technology wasn't there. It took years to work out what it was. Is it a virus? Is it this? Is it? No one knew. What I think is interesting is with our modern technology, which I really think was good. Within a few hours, they'd isolated the genetic sequence of the virus, and the mRNA vaccine, they could produce it instantly. I mean, the technology was there. People are saying it's new technology. Actually, it's been around for 10 years. being used in animals.
It has, and the animal studies have not been good. That's why they haven't released many of them. The ferrets that died because they had no immunity after exposed to, and the ferret, of course, they use in these studies because they have the closest respiratory system to the human being. So whenever they use these, the animal studies didn't come out for that reason, because they murdered all of the, it was a flop. Now, if a vaccine comes out and kills 15 people, they pull it from the market immediately. This thing has killed more people in the last 7 months than in the last 15 years of every single vaccine ever created. This is not a vaccine. It's a gene sequencing tool, from my understanding. Now, if you tell people that this is the only way that you can do it, and you don't tell them, this is where the distrust comes. Because number one, I think that I'm a very conspiratorial-minded person. I don't trust anything that the media tells me anyway. I don't think that the government has your best interest in your health.
That's a good default position.
Well, and the reason that you know this is because, again, they're giving you these options over here, which are very stay away from people, be scared, stay in your home, don't get any bacteria on you, sanitize everything, so therefore your immunity will go to shit. They're not telling you the things that you should actually want to hear and things that will actually make people better. Again, sunlight, exercise, they don't mention any of that shit.
Yeah, although, I mean, but that's not entirely true. I mean, the vitamin D, I mean, it became pretty clear early on that we needed to get our vitamin D levels up. It wasn't pushed as much as other things were, but within the medical profession, we've, a lot of doctors I know have been saying it to people. I have been. You up your vitamin D levels. That came out. There's a guy called Dr. John Campbell, who's a medical educator. He was pushing that early on. The other stuff, the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, all this controversy. I mean, people are looking at them and people are frustrated because it's not so. It's because they want it now. But I mean, you need to, when you're starting mass medicating, you have to be fairly sure. I'm fairly I mean, when it comes to the vaccine, people think it's been rushed. It hasn't been rushed. No. The thing is, I don't think it's been rushed at all.
No, I agree. It's been around for a long time.
They've thrown so much money at it that the phases that are normally slow because of lack of money, they've just thrown money at it. And I think it indicates that actually if we threw more money at health impacts rather than building weapons, we can make great strides. I mean, we're going to differ because I think the mRNA technology is going to be very useful in terms of medicine. And there's all sorts of therapeutic benefits for it, from treating cancers and all sorts of other things. And what I say to my patients, well, I don't like this. I say, well, how do you want to get your spike protein? Do you want it the natural way, or do you want it an artificial way that's controlled? Do you just want the pure spike protein, or do you want the whole virus? I'd rather have just the spike protein, because the virus does the same thing. It gets into your system, it hijacks your cells, it makes mRNA and starts churning out spike protein. That's natural, Brandon, and that's not good. You die as a result.
It's not natural if they wrap it in this coating of nanoparticles, the nanolipid particles, to slip it past your immune system. You've got to trick your body into taking this thing, and once you get it, you can never get it out. And it snaps your RNA, is what I've heard. Therefore, you become not human anymore on a very basic, on the most atomic level. Of course, you're still human. Go ahead.
mRNA doesn't incorporate into your genome, right? It doesn't. It just goes after a while. mRNA is the messenger chemical so your DNA makes RNA, which then this RNA then makes the protein. So you're giving the sequence to make the protein, but it's not altering your genetic structure at all. And the cells you're giving it into, in theory, express the protein, and then they lose it. Now, there's some controversy as to if you inject it into the muscle cells, is it then possibly going to the heart cells, all sorts of things. But, they've given billions of doses of this yet. You haven't seen mass die-offs of people. In fact, it's saved lives. So, look, the big experiment's been done now, and I'm part of it. We'll see what happens.
I think we're all a part of it.
Things can go wrong, absolutely. But, I mean, yeah, it's a case of what do you do if you really believe, as I believe, that you've got a virus that's absolutely killing people, and I can see it before my eyes. You've got a risk versus benefits. I mean, there may be some side effects and some people may die from it, but less people from the vaccine than the virus. And I really believe that. Absolutely believe it, wholeheartedly.
And I believe that that is your experience, which is what you're basing this on, because you're a highly intelligent man. I'm not telling you that you're stupid, or I'm not telling you anybody that believes in this in a different way than is something that resonates with me or a lot of people actually, that they're dumb or that they're misinformed or any of that kind of stuff, because you create your reality. Back to the placebo thing. You could be told something, of course, then that's going to lead you to those conclusions. We could be told that this is the way things work, and therefore you can be convinced of that, but you can do that on either side, which is fascinating to me. The human psyche, this consciousness connection that you talk about, this idea of things being so juxtaposed, but being so validating and so real
Brennan,
and repeatable.
If I were to hypnotize you, let's say, if I were to hypnotize you and say, look, Brandon, no such things as cars. They don't exist. And I could do that. But I say, Brandon, highway over there, go and walk out there. You're not going to be run over?
No, this is a good point.
What do you think is going to happen?
No, this is a great point, because the
universe splits.
Realities.
There's one Brandon that gets run over in my universe, and
then cars don't exist. No, this is a great example, because this is what's so interesting about the idea. You can see this in a lot of ways, but you can also see the counter to it, which is a wonderful argument you just made, because clearly there are a set of standards here that we all kind of agree with, but there are some microcosms that can't necessarily be viewed in this way. And again, the reason is because of that double slit experiment in quantum physics. This is what screwed me all up with this idea.
There's a scientific argument that says you never die.
Yes.
And the idea is that when the point you die, your consciousness goes into, now this has actually been a scientific argument, that actually you then go into a universe where that never happened.
Yes.
The people in one universe see Brandon get hit by the car, but Brandon himself doesn't get hit by the car because the car veers. And
you know what's interesting about this point, though? In this reality, I did die, which proved your point that cars do exist.
But in Brandon's reality, it doesn't
happen. But in my reality,
it
didn't, because I shifted to another reality.
Hang on. Can we have a disclaimer? Don't try. Oh, have I frozen? Don't try this at home, folks.
You are frozen, but don't worry about it. I don't think that we need to tell this audience that. I've got a lot of practical-minded people, but also with their heads in the cloud. So we've got a wonderful listening audience that you don't have to. They're not a bunch of dummies, but I like the point. I like the disclaimer. So listen, this one's already ran long as hell. Again, I could talk to you about everything all the time, because I think that we're just scratching the surface on these kind of ideas. And again, my understanding of what's going on is nothing. I only see what's going on around me. I'm more of an observer, and so whenever I see people in depth, entrenched in this ideology, and see the results, see, if you do this, that'll work. Cause and effect based on an ideology. But you can also see cause and effect, real implications based on a totally other ideology, and they're at odds with each other. I just think that it's another set of conditions in this dichotomy type of reality, that's here, and it's just one that we're starting to figure out, or I'm just starting to kind of take notice of, that it goes beyond just sun and moon, dark and light, hot and cold. It goes to your actual experience where our realities overlap, and I'm just finding this fascinating, man.
I'm just trying to work out why the hell I've frozen here, but I got...
It's okay. It's okay. It's actually probably the universe saying, all right, guys, you've had enough here. Let people marinate on what you guys have talked about, and then we will talk to you again soon. So, Dr. Ian Rubenstein, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been amazing. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the exchange. I feel it's great. It's great fun. Haven't had this much fun since I was a student. Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's just, and again, scratching the surface. You are welcome on any time. I've got actually some panels and stuff that I'm going to be working on here soon, and I'd love to consider you as part of that if you want me to put your name in that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is good. I mean, I've been listening to your podcast now. You've got some great guests, some really interesting people. It's all the guests. Have you had Randall Carlson on ever? Not yet, but he is definitely on my list of people I would love to talk to. Him, I mean, there's just so many wonderful people. Dr. Robert Schoch, of course, I'd love to have him on. I just had Larry Paul on, and we were talking about the pyramids, which I'm fascinated by. And again, all these different ideas that kind of, different evidence. Egyptologists say that the Sphinx is built right along with the pyramids. Robert Schoch and weather erosion, actual physical evidence says that they were built thousands of years before them. So again, it's all of it, and it infiltrates everything. It infiltrates the way that you see color, the way that our history is, perceived by you, the way the physics is perceived by you. I love it. I think that this place is, the more you shine light on something, it creates a million more questions and a million more mysteries. And that's what's so beautiful, is I don't think I'm figuring things out. I'm figuring out that there's way more here than you could ever figure out.
Okay, Brandon. Well, mate, look, stay in touch, my friend. It's been really interesting speaking with you. It's great having your ideas challenged and then sort of kicking them backwards and forwards, because you're certainly opened my mind to new ways of thinking. No doubt about that. You've
And
already,
you to me.
already got me thinking along some new ideas, actually.
And you to me. I mean, this is what's beautiful about this type of communication is we could just discuss the ideas, man. And it's ultimately what works for you is what works for you.
Yeah. Okay. All
I
right,
love
then.
it. I'm grateful that we've connected, my friend. We will do this again. Dr. Ian
Okay.
Rubenstein, thank you so much again, my friend.
Okay. Take care. Bye, Brandon.
Well, that was part 2 of Dr. Ian Rubenstein. I could have a million episodes with that guy and probably never get to the bottom of everything. And I think that's kind of the point. And it's something that I was telling my wife after recording this episode is that it got me fired up in a great way, in a way that just, you know, as you research these types of things and you go down more esoteric rabbit holes, you find that a lot of this reality is just simply what you make it. And if that's the understanding, then people that know that could have hijacked this understanding and taken it away from us, right? So this idea, though, that perception is reality, that the 6 is the 9, that they're the same thing, and both have a very valid reason for existing. This type of concept is something that fascinates me. Dr. Ian Rubenstein was perfect in articulating his point of view on this. I think we both challenged kind of the way that we look at and interact with the world around us, which is the point of this whole damn show, guys. This is why you come here, is to discuss the ideas and to find out a little bit more about your world. But again, to the point that the more you find out about this place, the more mysteries there are. You open one door, that leads to 2. 2 leads to 4. 4 leads to 8. It's a never-ending quest for what is true. And if that's the case, then I'm enjoying the hell out of the ride. I mean, it gets more and more mysterious. The plot thickens literally as you move forward into these types of concepts and understandings, which lead you to more understandings and more concepts. So it's this fascinating spiral. I mean, I get the ignorance is bliss thing, where people can just sit there and say, I don't want to mess with any of this. I can empathize with that understanding. I just don't resonate at that frequency, again, which is why you guys are here. So, longest outro ever. Guys, please check out the show notes for expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is where the links to all the socials can be found. This dope music that you're hearing is my buddy Vinny the Saint. His link is down there as well. Go check out his music, guys. He does some incredible work. So go out into this mysterious place we call our reality this week, guys, and pick up a piece of litter. Of course, be nice to everybody that you come across. Buy a coffee or a meal or something like that. Hold some doors open. I mean, it's not hard to change the world around you. This is the garden in which you can tend. Get out of the left-hand lane, of course, and go out into this world, guys. Explore these mysteries. Have these kind of conversations. And above and beyond anything else from all of this, y'all just go out there and just be good to one another. We need that understanding now more than ever. Be good to one another. Thank y'all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.